I've faced down insurgents in Kabul and survived mortar fire in Baghdad, but nothing prepared me for the weapon my mother deployed in our suburban kitchen. I wish you'd never been my daughter, she spat on Mother's Day. The next morning, I discovered she wasn't just being cruel. She was telling the absolute truth. The drive from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, to Richmond, Virginia, usually takes about 3.5 hours. On that particular Sunday, the second Sunday of May, it felt like a deployment into hostile territory. I am Captain Sarah Jenkins, United States Army Military Intelligence. I spend my days analyzing satellite imagery, decrypting intercepts, and building psychological profiles of people who want to do terrible things to my country. But as I pulled my Jeep Wrangler into the pristine, manicured driveway of my childhood home, my heart hammered against my ribs with the kind of primal anxiety no combat training can drill out of you. I was just a daughter desperately hoping that, this year, things would be different. The house looked exactly as it always had, a stately colonial with immaculate azalea bushes and a front porch that belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. My sister Chloe was already there. I could tell by the silver Lexus SUV parked near the garage, a stark contrast to my dust-covered Jeep. Chloe was everything my mother, Beatrice, had always wanted in a daughter. She married a corporate lawyer named Greg, had 2 beautiful children who played the cello and spoke conversational French by age 6, and lived in a gated community in Alexandria. I took a deep breath, grabbed the small, carefully wrapped box from the passenger seat, a vintage silver brooch I'd spent weeks hunting down in an antique shop, and walked up the steps. "Sarah, you made it!" Chloe greeted me at the door, her smile flawless, holding a glass of Chardonnay. She pulled me into a brief, polite hug that smelled of expensive jasmine perfume. "Hey, Chloe, wouldn't miss it," I said, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled of roasting lamb and rosemary. From the kitchen, the sharp, rhythmic sound of a chef's knife against a wooden cutting board echoed like a metronome. I walked in to find my mother, Beatrice, standing at the island. Her graying hair was styled into an elegant bob, her apron spotless over a navy silk blouse. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," I said, offering the small silver box. Beatrice didn't stop chopping the carrots. She didn't look up. "Put it on the counter, Sarah. Your hands are probably filthy from that vehicle of yours." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and set the box down. "I washed them at a rest stop. It's good to see you. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Set the table. And please, take off those boots. You're tracking dust onto the hardwood." The dinner was a master class in passive-aggressive warfare. We sat in the formal dining room, the good crystal catching the light of the chandelier. For the first 30 minutes, Beatrice held court with Chloe, discussing the children's private school tuitions and Greg's upcoming promotion. I ate in silence, the lamb tasting like ash in my mouth. I had news of my own, huge news. I was being promoted to major, and I had just been selected for a highly classified task force operating out of Eastern Europe. It was the culmination of 8 years of grueling work. "So, Sarah," Chloe said, turning to me with a sympathetic, albeit patronizing smile, "are you still stationed down at that dusty base in North Carolina? Any plans to, transition into the civilian sector? Greg's firm is always looking for security consultants." "Actually," I said, putting my fork down and looking at my mother, hoping to see a flicker of pride, "I'm being promoted. I'll be pinning on major next month. And I've been assigned to a new Joint Intelligence Task Force. I'll be deploying to Europe." Silence fell over the dining room. The clinking of silverware stopped. Beatrice's jaw tightened. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her wine glass. "Europe," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "More playing soldier." "It's not playing, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a massive career milestone. I'm leading a team." "Just like your father," she sneered, slamming her glass down so hard the wine sloshed over the rim onto the pristine white tablecloth. Arthur thought he was a hero too. Running off to God knows where, leaving his family behind to play in the dirt with guns. And look where it got him. My father, Captain Arthur Jenkins, had died in what the military called a routine training accident in West Germany when I was 4 years old. His closed casket funeral was my earliest memory. It was the reason I joined the army. I wanted to understand him. I wanted to finish what he started. Dad died serving his country, I said, the heat rising in my cheeks. And I'm proud to wear the same uniform. I thought, just once, on Mother's Day, you might be proud of me too. Beatrice stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floorboards, her eyes, cold and dark, locked onto mine. There was a depth of hatred in them that paralyzed me. Proud? She whispered, her voice vibrating with venom. You come into my house, reeking of the institution that ruined my life, demanding my pride? You are a constant, walking reminder of the worst mistake I ever made. Mom, please, Chloe interjected, her voice trembling, but Beatrice ignored her. She leaned across the table, her face inches from mine. I never wanted you to join the military. I begged you not to. But you are exactly like him, selfish, reckless, destructive. She took a ragged breath, delivering the final, fatal blow. I wish you'd never been my daughter. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I didn't cry. My training took over. Compartmentalize the trauma. Evacuate the hot zone. I stood up slowly, picked up my keys from the side table, and looked at the woman who raised me. Message received. Beatrice, Happy Mother's Day. I walked out the front door, got into my Jeep, and drove away. I didn't stop until I hit the North Carolina state line, the rain lashing against my windshield, matching the storm tearing me apart inside. 0530 hours. The next morning, the heavy bag in the base gym shuddered under the force of my knuckles. Left jab, right cross, left hook. I was drenched in sweat, my breath echoing in the empty facility. Physical pain was the only way to silence the loop of my mother's voice playing in my head. I wish you'd never been my daughter. My phone buzzed against the metal bench. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I stripped off my boxing gloves and grabbed the phone. The caller ID flashed Chloe. What is it, Chloe? I answered, my voice clipped, breathless. If she sent you to apologize on her behalf, save it. Sarah. Chloe's voice was a high-pitched, jagged sob. Sarah, you have to come back. Right now. My military instincts flared. The tone of her voice wasn't drama. It was genuine, blinding terror. Chloe, slow down. Sit down. Breathe. Tell me exactly what's happening. It's Mom, she gasped, her breath catching in the receiver. She's gone, Sarah. I came over this morning to check on her because she wouldn't answer her phone. The front door was wide open. The house is completely trashed. And, Sarah, there's blood on the patio. The world tilted on its axis. Did you call 911? The police are already here. A Detective Miller is asking for you. He says because of your security clearance. Sarah, I'm scared. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone else. I'm on my way. I ended the call, dialed my commanding officer, Colonel Richard Hayes, and secured an emergency leave within 3 minutes. I threw my gear into a duffel bag, bypassed the shower, and was on I-95 North before the sun had fully risen over the North Carolina pines. When I arrived at the house in Richmond 4 hours later, it looked like a war zone. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the perimeter. Neighbors were gathered on the sidewalks, whispering behind cupped hands. I flashed my military ID at the patrolman blocking the driveway and ducked under the tape. Chloe was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, wrapped in a shock blanket, weeping silently. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a rumpled suit approached me. He held up a gold badge. Captain Jenkins? I'm Detective Miller, Richmond PD. I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Where is she? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I couldn't be a daughter right now. I had to be an intelligence officer. We don't know, Miller said, rubbing the back of his neck. No sign of forced entry. It looks like a struggle started in the hallway and moved to the back patio. We found a significant amount of blood near the French doors. Forensics is running it now, but given the volume, it doesn't look good. I need to see the house. Captain, it's an active crime scene. I can't let you. Detective, I cut him off, stepping into his personal space. My mother is missing. I have a TS, SCI clearance with the Department of Defense. and I spend my life tracking high-value targets. Let me walk the floor." Miller hesitated, then sighed, handing me a pair of latex gloves and blue shoe covers. "Don't touch anything. Walk where I walk." Stepping into my childhood home felt like entering an alien landscape. Furniture was overturned. The antique grandfather clock my mother cherished was shattered, its glass spread across the oriental rug like diamonds. I walked past the kitchen, the cutting board from yesterday, still on the island, the knife missing, and moved toward my mother's study at the back of the house. "We've processed this room," Miller said, standing in the doorway. "Nothing missing that we can tell. Laptops and jewelry were left behind. This wasn't a robbery." I didn't answer him. I was looking at the oak bookshelf. Growing up, my father had a quirk. He was a cryptographer for the army, obsessed with puzzles. He used to leave me hidden messages around the house using basic substitution ciphers. I traced my gloved hand along the edge of the bottom shelf. There, scratched faintly into the wood, was a symbol. A circle with a diagonal line through it, intersecting a small triangle. It was a NATO tactical sign for a hidden cache, one my father had taught me when I was 7. "Detective," I said quietly, "are you absolutely sure this house belonged to Beatrice Jenkins?" Miller frowned. "What kind of question is that?" I knelt down, pressing my hands against the heavy oak base of the bookshelf. I felt along the molding until my fingers found a slight indentation. I pushed hard. A soft click echoed in the silent room. A section of the floorboard, perfectly camouflaged, popped up half an inch. Miller stepped forward, his hand dropping to his sidearm. "What did you just do?" "I just found what they were looking for," I murmured. I lifted the floorboard. Inside a small, lead-lined cavity sat a heavy, fireproof lockbox. The padlock had been hastily smashed open, likely years ago, but the lid was shut. I opened it. Inside wasn't jewelry or old love letters. It was a stack of manila folders, stamped with faded red ink, classified, eyes only. I pulled out the top file. My heart stopped. The name on the tab wasn't Arthur Jenkins. It was Project Nightingale. I opened the folder. The first document was a birth certificate. The baby's name was listed as Natalia Volkov. Place of birth, East Berlin, 1993. That was the year I was born. Clipped to the back of the certificate was a black and white surveillance photo. It showed a man passing a bundle to a woman in a heavy trench coat under a street lamp. The man was my father, Arthur Jenkins. The woman was Beatrice. But the date stamped on the bottom right corner of the photograph made my blood run cold. The 12th of November, 1999. My father had died in 1997. Beneath the photo was a single handwritten note on military-issue stationery, penned in my father's distinct, blocky handwriting. "B. They've compromised the network. I'm burning my identity. Keep the girl safe. Tell her I died. If they ever find out who her real mother was, they will kill you both." I stared at the paperwork, the air leaving my lungs. My mother hadn't hated me because I reminded her of the husband she lost. She hated me because I was the asset she was forced to protect. "Captain?" Detective Miller's voice broke through the ringing in my ears. "What is that?" I closed the file, my hands shaking. The woman who had told me she wished I'd never been her daughter wasn't my mother, and the father I had mourned my entire life was still alive. "Detective," I whispered, looking up at him. "Call the FBI. We don't have a missing person. We have an extraction." Within 2 hours of my discovery, Detective Miller's local crime scene was swallowed whole by the federal government. Black SUVs replaced the local cruisers, and a team of men in immaculate suits who flashed credentials from the Department of Defense stripped the house down to its studs. I was escorted into the back of a mobile command unit parked on my mother's manicured lawn and introduced to Special Agent William Paxton. He was a quintessential company man, sharp haircut, devoid of empathy, and visibly irritated by my presence. "Captain Jenkins," Paxton said, sliding my father's classified folder into a tamper-proof evidence bag. "Or should I say, Volkov, you understand that your clearance, while impressive for a tactical field officer, does not give you the right to access legacy Cold War black files. You've compromised an active investigation." "Active?" I scoffed, the adrenaline still burning in my veins. My father died in 1997. My mother was just abducted from her kitchen. What part of Project Nightingale is currently active, Agent Paxton? Paxton leaned forward, his face an impenetrable mask. As of this moment, Beatrice Jenkins is classified as a missing person. You will return to Fort Liberty. You will pin on your major oak leaves. You will deploy to your new assignment in Europe next week as scheduled. If you breathe a word of this to anyone, including your sister, Chloe, you will spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth. Do we understand each other? They were freezing me out. I was a military intelligence officer, trained to dismantle terror cells, but to them, I was just civilian collateral damage in a spy game that predated my existence. I didn't argue. Arguing with a federal wall is a waste of oxygen. I gave Paxton a crisp nod, walked out of the command unit, and drove back to North Carolina. I hugged Chloe, told her the FBI was handling a complex kidnapping case, and promised I would find our mother. I didn't tell her that her entire life was built on a foundation of operational aliases. I didn't tell her I was adopted from a divided Berlin. 2 weeks later, I was Major Sarah Jenkins, stationed at Patch Barracks in Stuttgart, Germany, assigned to the United States European Command, EUCOM. My day job was managing a joint task force analyzing Russian troop movements along the Baltic borders. My night job was hunting a ghost. I had memorized every detail of that birth certificate and the 1,999 surveillance photo before Paxton confiscated them. I knew my father's operational patterns. Arthur Jenkins was a cryptographer who loved puzzles, dead drops, and analog systems. He wouldn't have left a digital footprint. He would have left a trail only his daughter could follow. I started spending my nights in the SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, abusing my top-secret clearance to cross-reference legacy intelligence reports from the late 1990s. I was looking for anomalies in Berlin and Vienna during the weeks following Arthur's death. It took me a month to find the thread. I was running a search algorithm through archived SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, when a flagged communication intercepted in 2004 popped up. It was a partial radio transmission from a known Russian SVR handler, translated into English. Subject Nightingale remains dark. Asset Beatrice verified in United States. Recommend cessation of active pursuit until leverage can be established. The architect is dead, but the blueprint remains. The architect, my father. The blueprint, me. If my father was alive, he was hiding in plain sight in the very theater he used to operate in. I requested a 48-hour weekend pass, packed a sterile burner phone, a Glock 19 illegally sourced through a sympathetic quartermaster, and boarded a civilian train to Vienna, Austria. Vienna is a city built on secrets. Even today, it is the espionage capital of the world, a neutral ground where spies from the east and west drink coffee in the same cafes, silently watching each other. I walked the cobblestone streets of the inner Stadt for 6 hours, visiting every known drop site the CIA had documented in the 90s. Nothing. I was running out of time, sitting on a damp bench near the Danube River, when I remembered the symbol carved into my mother's bookshelf. A circle, intersected by a line and a triangle. NATO tactical for a hidden cache. But my father didn't just use NATO signs. He used to read to me from an old book of European architecture. He loved the intricate geometric designs of Gothic cathedrals. I pulled out my phone and searched for the nearest Gothic structure, St. Stephen's Cathedral. I walked into the massive, dimly lit cathedral, the smell of frankincense heavy in the cold air. Tourists milled about with cameras, but my eyes scanned the stonework near the catacombs entrance. I traced the perimeter until I found it, scratched lightly into the mortar between two massive stones in a shadowy alcove, the exact same symbol. Beneath the symbol was a sequence of numbers, barely visible. Coordinates. They pointed to a location 40 minutes outside the city limits, an old, semi-abandoned train yard near the Slovakian border. The rain started falling as I approached the train yard, a sprawling graveyard of rusted Soviet-era cargo cars. The only sound was the wind howling through the metal husks. I kept my hand inside my jacket, resting on the cold grip of the Glock. "You're checking your corners well, but your footsteps are too heavy on the gravel, Major." The voice echoed from the shadows between two boxcars. It was older, gravelly, and laced with a thick accent I couldn't place. I drew my weapon instantly, aiming at the darkness. "Step out into the light. Keep your hands where I can see them." A figure emerged from the rain. He was tall, gaunt, wearing a heavy wool coat. His hair was completely white, and a jagged scar ran from his left ear down to his collarbone. He held his hands up slowly. I stared down the barrel of my gun at the man from the 1999 surveillance photo. "Hello, Natalia," Arthur Jenkins said softly. My breath hitched. The military discipline I had relied on for a decade threatened to shatter. "Give me one reason I shouldn't put a bullet in your kneecap for letting me believe you were in a box under the ground for 20 years. Arthur didn't flinch. "Because if you shoot me, you'll never find Beatrice, and she has less than 72 hours before the SVR breaks her." I lowered the gun slightly, though I didn't holster it. "Who are you?" "My real name is Elias Mercer. I was a deep cover operative for MI6, embedded in East Berlin during the fall of the wall. Your mother, your biological mother, was an SVR asset. We fell in love. It was a cliché that nearly got us all killed. When she got pregnant with you, we tried to defect." He took a step forward, the rain plastering his white hair to his forehead. "The Russians caught us before we made it to the checkpoint. Your mother was executed. I managed to escape with you. The CIA offered me a deal. They gave me a new identity, Arthur Jenkins. They gave me a wife, an agency handler named Beatrice, to legitimize my cover. And they hid us in the suburbs of Virginia." "Project Nightingale," I whispered, the pieces violently clicking into place. "Yes. But in 1997, the SVR found my trail. They didn't know about you, but they knew I was alive. I had to fake my death to cut the scent. I left you with Beatrice because it was the only way to keep you safe. She was the best operative I ever knew. She hated me," I spat, the venom of Mother's Day rising in my throat. "She resented every breath I took. Do you know what she said to me the day before she was taken? She looked me in the eyes and said she wished I'd never been her daughter." Elias looked at me, a profound, agonizing sorrow in his eyes. He slowly reached into his coat. I raised my gun, but he only pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the wet ground between us. "Pick it up," he said. I kept my gun leveled on him with one hand while I crouched and picked up the paper with the other. I unfolded it with my thumb. It was a printed email intercept, dated the Friday before Mother's Day. "Target located in Richmond. Visual confirmation on the asset Beatrice. Strike team authorized for extraction on Sunday. Secure the woman. Terminate the daughter if present." My blood ran cold. "Beatrice intercepted that transmission," Elias said, his voice breaking. "She knew a Russian hit squad was coming to that house on Sunday. She knew she couldn't run, she was too old, and they had the perimeter locked down. But she had to get you out of the kill zone." The memory of the dining room flashed in my mind, the way Beatrice gripped her wine glass, the calculated cruelty in her eyes, the sudden violent outburst over my military career. "You are a constant, walking reminder of the worst mistake I ever made. I wish you'd never been my daughter." "She provoked you," Elias said quietly. "She knew your triggers. She knew exactly what to say to make you leave that house in a blind rage and drive all the way back to North Carolina. She broke your heart to save your life." The Glock felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I lowered it to my side. "The blood on the patio belonged to two of the Russian operatives," Elias said, a grim pride entering his voice. "Beatrice didn't go quietly. She took two of them out with a kitchen knife before they subdued her. They took her alive because they think she knows where I am. And they think she knows where the Nightingale data is." "Do they know who I am?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Not yet. To them, you are just Sarah Jenkins, an unfortunate civilian bystander. But once they torture Beatrice long enough, she might break. If they find out you are Natalia Volkov, they will never stop hunting you." I closed my eyes. The rain washed over my face, mixing with the tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed since I stood in that ruined kitchen in Virginia. The woman I had resented my entire life, the woman whose affection I had desperately chased, had orchestrated the ultimate sacrifice. She had weaponized my hatred of her to push me out of the line of fire. She wasn't a cold mother. She was a soldier taking a bullet for her asset, for her daughter. I opened my eyes, the sorrow evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp, terrifying clarity. I was no longer a victim of a broken family. I was Captain Sarah Jenkins, United States Army Military Intelligence, and I was Natalia Volkov, the ghost of the Cold War. I holstered my weapon and stepped up to the man who gave me life. "Where are they holding her, Elias?" He looked at me, seeing the lethal shift in my posture. "There's a black site in Kaliningrad, a decommissioned naval bunker on the Baltic coast. It's heavily fortified. The CIA won't touch it. UCOM won't sanction a raid. If we go completely off the grid. If we're caught, we're disavowed. I build psychological profiles on terrorists, and I map hostile compounds for breakfast," I said, zipping my jacket against the cold wind. "I have access to satellite feeds that can read the serial numbers on a Russian guard's rifle from space. We are going to Kaliningrad. It's a suicide mission, Sarah." "No," I replied, turning my back to the wind and looking toward the east. "It's a rescue mission. Beatrice Jenkins saved my life on Mother's Day. I am going to return the favor." That's how my Mother's Day ended. Not with flowers, but with a classified extraction mission to a Russian black site. Did we make it out of Kaliningrad alive? You'll have to stick around to find out. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share this video with your true crime and mystery-obsessed friends, and make sure to subscribe. Drop a comment below with Operation Nightingale to unlock the final explosive chapter.